In the frozen silence of the 3rd century, in the sun-bleached port city of Patara, on the southern coast of what is now Turkey, a boy was born who would one day shake the world without ever knowing it. His name was Nicholas. The year was roughly 270 AD. Rome still ruled the Mediterranean with an iron grip, and the old gods still lingered in the temples. But something new was stirring in the shadow springs of the empire. Nicholas came from wealth. His parents were devout Christians who died in an epidemic when he was still young, leaving him an inheritance that could have bought half the province. He gave it away. All of it. Secretly. At night. Through windows. Into the homes of the desperate. One story above all others survived the centuries. 3 sisters, too poor for dowries, faced a future of prostitution or slavery. On 3 separate nights, bags of gold landed in their home, tossed through an open window. One legend says into stockings hung by the fire to dry. The father waited on the 3rd night and caught the giver. Nicholas begged him to tell no one. The father swore he would not. He lied. The secret spread like wildfire across the Roman world. By the time Nicholas became Bishop of Myra, the miracles had already begun to follow him. He saved sailors from storms. He resurrected murdered children hidden in a pickling barrel by a greedy innkeeper. He appeared in dreams to the Emperor Constantine and convinced him to spare the lives of 3 innocent officers condemned to death. When Nicholas himself finally died on December 6th in the year 343, the people of Myra refused to let him go. They built a basilica over his tomb. They collected the oily liquid that seeped from his bones and called it manna. Pilgrims came from across the known world. His feast day, December 6th, became a carnival of giving. Children left their shoes by the hearth and woke to find them filled with coins or sweets. In the cold and dark of winter, one man had become the living proof that generosity could defeat despair. Centuries rolled forward like slow tides. The Roman Empire fractured. The Arabs swept across North Africa. The Turks pressed in from the east. In 1087, Italian merchants from Bari, terrified that Muslim armies would overrun Myra and desecrate the saint's bones, sailed under cover of night, broke into the basilica, and stole the relics. They carried them home in barrels of holy oil and built a new crypt beneath a gleaming cathedral. St. Nicholas now belonged to the West. From Bari, his cult exploded across Europe. In the Netherlands, he became Sinterklaas, a stern but loving bishop who rode a white horse across the rooftops and dropped gifts down chimneys with the help of a mischievous Moor named Zwarte Piet. In Germany, he merged with ancient pagan figures, the wild hunters of the winter forest. In England, he became Father Christmas, cloaked in green, crowned with holly. Everywhere he went, the night grew kinder. The poor received bread. The children received hope. And no one, not even the church, imagined that one day, this same saint would be weaponized by a soft drink company from Georgia and turned into the most successful commercial mascot in human history. But the world was changing faster than anyone understood. The Industrial Revolution had torn families from the soil and packed them into cities where winter meant coal smoke and hunger instead of quiet snow and sacred stories. Christmas itself was dying in the New World. In America, the Puritan fathers had banned it outright, calling it pagan nonsense soaked in popish liquor. By the early 1800s, the holiday was little more than an excuse for drunken mobs to roam the streets, demanding money from the rich. Something had to be done. In 1823, an anonymous poem called A Visit from St. Nicholas, better known as "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," began to circulate. It painted a new picture, a jolly elf with a sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer who slipped down chimneys bearing toys for sleeping children. No bishop, no miracles, just magic and presents. The author, a scholar named Clement Clark Moore, claimed he wrote it for his own kids. He never explained where the image came from. It spread like a virus. Within a generation, the stern European saint had been shrunk into a mischievous sprite, no bigger than an elf. And still, the transformation was not complete. The beard was there, but it was short. The belly was round, but the coat could be any color. The sleigh existed, but no one agreed what pulled it or where it came from. The myth floated, half-formed, waiting for someone with enough money and imagination to freeze it forever. Across the Atlantic, in the red clay hills of post-war Atlanta, a failed pharmacist turned patent medicine huckster named John Stith Pemberton was mixing a headache tonic in a 3-legged brass kettle. He called it Coca-Cola. It contained cocaine, cola nut extract, sugar, and secret oils. It promised to cure morphine addiction, dyspepsia, and neurasthenia. People drank it and felt like gods. When Georgia passed prohibition laws, Pemberton's partner removed the alcohol and marketed the syrup to soda fountains as a temperance drink. Sales crawled upward. By the 1890s, a sharp-eyed bookkeeper named Asa Griggs Candler owned the formula outright. He began bottling it. He painted the name on barn roofs and pharmacy walls in looping white script. He gave away clocks and calendars and coupons until the country could not look anywhere without seeing those two words glowing like a promise. But winter sales were terrible. Nobody wanted an ice-cold drink when the temperature dropped. The company needed a miracle. And miracles, as history had already proven, could be bought. The year 1920 found Coca-Cola at a crossroads. The war was over, sugar rationing had ended, and America was drunk on prosperity and gasoline. Yet every December, the sales charts fell off a cliff. Asa Candler had sold the company for $25 million to a syndicate of Atlanta bankers led by Ernest Woodruff. His son, Robert Winship Woodruff, barely 31 years old, had just taken the reins as president. Woodruff was quiet, ruthless, and obsessed with one idea. Coca-Cola had to become as inevitable as breathing. He studied the calendar like a battlefield map and saw winter as the last unconquered territory. He summoned his advertising lieutenant, Archie Lee, head of the Darcy Advertising Agency, and gave him a single directive: make people want an ice-cold Coca-Cola in a snowstorm. Make it feel like Christmas itself tastes like Coca-Cola. Lee understood the assignment. He also understood that Christmas in 1920 was still a chaotic patchwork. In some homes, it was religious. In others, drunken. In others, barely observed at all. The country needed a unified image, something warm and universal that could sit in the American living room without offending Protestant, Catholic, or Jew. They needed a symbol that belonged to no church and no nation, yet somehow to everyone. They needed St. Nicholas, but stripped of theology, politics, and history. The first attempts were tentative. In 1920, Coca-Cola ads showed a stern, thin Santa in a red robe that looked borrowed from a cathedral, holding a bottle like it was communion wine. The next year, they tried a fat, bearded traveler in a brown coat, warming himself with a Coke at a soda fountain. Year after year, the artists fiddled with the coat color, the beard length, the expression. Nothing stuck. By 1930, the country had crashed into the Depression. Bread lines stretched around blocks. Children went barefoot in December. Christmas felt like a cruel joke. Woodruff doubled the advertising budget anyway. He believed despair was the perfect soil for mythology. That same year, a Swedish-American illustrator named Haddon Sundblom sat in a Chicago studio with a blank canvas and a brief that read, in essence, "Make him real." Sundblom did not invent Santa Claus. He simply looked at every version that had ever existed and chose the pieces that made the heart ache in the right way. He gave him the red coat because red was Coca-Cola's color, and because red is the color of life against snow. He made the beard white and flowing like a glacier. He widened the belt until it looked like it could hold the world's kindness. He painted the eyes with a permanent twinkle, as if the old man knew every secret wish you had ever whispered. Sundblom's first Santa appeared in the Saturday Evening Post in December 1931, standing in a midnight kitchen, pausing between deliveries to drink a Coca-Cola pulled fresh from the family refrigerator. The caption read, "My hat, someone who appreciates a good drink." The North Pole was never mentioned. The reindeer were off stage. There were no elves, just a tired, happy grandfather refreshing himself with the pause that refreshes. America exhaled. This was not a bishop demanding repentance. This was not a pagan spirit threatening coal. This was your favorite uncle who happened to own a flying sleigh. Letters poured in. Children wrote to Santa at Coca-Cola's Atlanta address. Mothers clipped the ads and taped them above fireplaces. Department stores begged for originals to display in their windows. Sundblom painted a new version every year for the next 33 years. Sometimes Santa read letters. Sometimes he checked his list twice. Sometimes he played with electric trains that looked suspiciously like the ones sold at Sears. Always the bottle was there, beaded with cold, glowing under Christmas lights like liquid garnet. The genius was in what Coca-Cola never said. They never claimed Santa preferred their drink above all others. They never showed him endorsing the product. He simply drank it the way a carpenter drinks water, the way a traveler drinks from a mountain stream. It was natural. It was inevitable. By 1940, the image had achieved escape velocity. Newspaper cartoonists copied Sunbloom Santa without knowing where he came from. Hollywood costume departments built suits to match. The United States Army Air Forces painted him on the noses of bombers flying over Germany, waving from the cockpit with a bottle in hand. During the war, Coca-Cola promised to sell a bottle to any American serviceman anywhere in the world for 5 cents, and they built 64 bottling plants behind the front lines to keep the prime. Santa went with them. In Naples, in Casablanca, in the Solomon Islands, local children met a red-suited giant who handed out Coca-Cola and became, for one afternoon, the living proof that the Americans brought more than bullets. Back home, the feedback loop tightened. Children who grew up with Sunbloom's paintings became parents who dressed their own kids as that same Santa. The Coca-Cola Santa appeared on ornaments, on Hallmark cards, on wrapping paper sold in every 5 and dime. Competitors tried to fight back. Pepsi hired Norman Rockwell. Canada Dry pushed a green-clad Sprite. They all lost. By the 1950s, the Sunbloom Santa had colonized the American imagination so completely that people swore they remembered him from their childhoods decades before he existed. Ask an 80-year-old in 1960 where Santa's red coat came from, and they would say, "He's always worn red. Everyone knows that." They were wrong. And they were right. Mythology had overwritten history. Robert Woodruff watched the numbers climb and never blinked. Christmas sales, once the company's weakness, became its strongest quarter. The red trucks with white script began rolling out every November like an invading army of joy. The brand had not merely borrowed a saint. It had performed the greatest act of transubstantiation in commercial history. A 3rd-century bishop who threw gold through windows to save girls from slavery had become a multinational mascot whose sole purpose was to sell sugar water. And almost no one noticed the theft. The takeover was never announced with trumpets. It happened in living rooms, in the soft glow of television tubes, in the hush that falls when snow starts to fall outside the window. By the late 1950s, Coca-Cola owned more than an image. It owned the emotional frequency of December. The company understood something ancient and terrifying. Myths do not belong to the cultures that birth them. They belong to whoever feeds them best. And Coca-Cola fed the myth like a farmer feeds a prize bull. Every year, the advertising budget grew fatter. Every year, the red trucks rolled earlier. Halloween displays were still rotting on porches when the first Coca-Cola Christmas commercial flickered across the screen. A stop-motion polar bear family appeared in 1993, sliding down icy hills with bottles pressed to their lips, and children who had never seen real snow begged their parents for the drink that made bears happy. Santa himself evolved again. The Sunbloom paintings were lovingly retired to museum archives, while new, smoother, more anodyne versions appeared in animated specials. The beard stayed luxurious, the suit stayed red, but the eyes grew wider, the smile grew broader, the edges grew softer, until he looked less like a man who had once faced Roman persecution, and more like a retiree who spent his days at the mall handing out candy canes. The rest of the world watched and learned. In Japan, where Christmas had never existed as a religious holiday, Coca-Cola arrived with department store Santas and taught an entire generation that December 25th was the night a fat man in red brought you fried chicken and Coca-Cola. KFC took the chicken. Coca-Cola took the feeling. In Germany, where the Christkindl still delivered gifts in many homes, children began leaving Coca-Cola by the fireplace alongside cookies because American movies told them that was what Santa wanted. In Mexico, where the Three Kings traditionally brought presents on January 6th, Santa Claus began showing up 2 weeks early, riding a Coca-Cola sled pulled by reindeer, who had never existed in Mayan or Aztec cosmology. The company never forced any of this. It simply seeded the imagery through global distribution and let human longing do the rest. People wanted the warm, fizzy feeling of belonging to something bigger than their village, their church, their past. Coca-Cola gave them a Christmas that required no baptism, no catechism, no centuries of tradition. All it required was a nickel and an open mouth. By the 1970s, the counterculture tried to fight back. Hippies called Santa a corporate shill. Underground comics drew him snorting coke, the other kind. Folk singers wrote songs about buying nothing. It changed nothing. The machine was too beautiful. In 1971, Coca-Cola spent $250,000, an obscene fortune at the time, to gather young people from every nation on a hilltop in Italy and film them singing that they would like to buy the world a Coke. The commercial aired once and became the most beloved advertisement in television history. Laws were passed in some countries banning it from reruns because people called the station in tears, begging to see it again. The hilltop was fiction. The harmony was dubbed. The message was ancient. Drink this, and the world will love you the way you always wished it would. Christmas was simply the concentrated version of that promise. Every lighted tree, every wrapped gift, every chorus of Silent Night became a delivery system for the feeling Coca-Cola had bottled decades earlier. The clergy noticed first. Priests in Europe complained that children no longer knew who St. Nicholas was. They knew who Santa Claus was, and Santa Claus worked for a company in Atlanta. In America, pastors preached sermons against the commercialization of Christ's birth and watched their congregations drift away to midnight mass at the mall. The company responded with genius restraint. They funded Christmas parades. They donated toys to orphanages. They printed ads showing Santa kneeling reverently in the snow as carolers sang. They never argued theology. They simply outflanked it. While churches fought among themselves about creches on public property, Coca-Cola flooded the public square with secular joy so irresistible that resistance felt like declaring war on childhood itself. The war was over before most people realized it had begun, and the money poured in like avalanche runoff. By the 1980s, Christmas had become the single largest annual economic event in the United States, dwarfing Thanksgiving, Easter, the Super Bowl. Retailers spoke of surviving or dying by the Christmas season, a phrase that now began in October and ended when the last credit card bill came due in January. Coca-Cola sat at the center of it all, not as a participant, but as the emotional thermostat. When sales of carbonated soft drinks began to slow in the new century, the company did not panic. It simply tightened its grip on the holiday. New campaigns showed Santa passing the bottle to his younger self across generations. Arctic truck convoys delivered Coca-Cola to remote villages, while hidden cameras captured real tears. The polar bears returned, now with cubs, teaching their young to recycle the bottles because even the North Pole had gone green. Every innovation carried the same subliminal message. The world may change, empires may fall, but Christmas and Coca-Cola are permanent fixtures of human happiness. The original Nicholas, the one who sold everything he owned and gave it to the poor, would not have recognized the empire built in his name. His bones still rest in Bari, visited by pilgrims who light candles and ask for miracles. Above them, in the cathedral gift shop, you can buy postcards of Santa enjoying a Coke after a long night of deliveries. The ironies stack like gifts beneath a tree. A man who spent his life fighting greed became the ultimate icon of consumption. A bishop who begged a father to keep his charity secret now has his face on billions of cans consumed by people who have never heard the word Myra. The poor he saved with anonymous gold are now invited to take out payday loans to buy their children the latest toys, delivered by his red-suited avatar. The wheel has come full circle, and the circle is made of aluminum and high-fructose corn syrup. Yet something deeper happened in the translation. The terror and awe that once clung to the winter solstice, the fear that the sun might never return, the gratitude when it did. All of that ancient electricity was captured, pasteurized, and carbonated. Coca-Cola did not kill Christmas. It rescued it from the margins of a secularizing world and gave it new life as a global feast of light and sugar. The price was the soul of the saint, but souls are abstract. Warmth is not. Laughter is not. The moment when a child sees the tree lit for the first time and feels the universe tilt toward mercy, that moment is real, and Coca-Cola owns the exclusive distribution rights. The 21st century arrived with a new weapon, the internet. Coca-Cola had spent 80 years building a cathedral out of sentiment. Now the cathedral doors flew open, and every soul on earth walked in at once. YouTube was born in 2005. Within 3 years, the company's Christmas truck commercials, those crimson convoys winding through snow-laden European villages while choirs sang about holidays coming, became the most forwarded videos on the planet. Children in Manila, in Sao Paulo, in Lagos, watched the same glowing trucks they would never see in real life and felt the same ache in their chest. The music was licensed, the snow was fake, the villages were scouted for maximum quaintness, yet the feeling traveled at the speed of light and arrived undamaged. Coca-Cola discovered that nostalgia could be weaponized globally. It did not need to translate the ads, it simply uploaded them raw. A red truck, bells, snow falling upward in reverse motion, a single line of text at the end, holidays are coming. 700 million views and counting, no subtitles required. The trucks themselves became pilgrimage objects. In Britain, where the campaign began in 1995, the company published the exact route weeks in advance. People camped overnight on roundabouts with thermos flasks and folding chairs just to watch a fleet of articulated lorries draped in 40,000 lights roll past for 90 seconds. Children screamed as if the vehicles carried the actual claws. Grown men wept. Newspapers wrote articles asking whether the phenomenon was sweet or sinister. The company said nothing. It simply added more trucks. By 2011, the tour stretched 35,000 miles across 11 countries. In Bogotá, the trucks climbed Andean passes at 10,000 feet, so children who had never seen snow could touch the refrigerated sides and pretend the cold was Christmas. In South Africa, they drove through townships where electricity was rationed and parked beneath the jacarandas so families could take selfies with a symbol brighter than any star their ancestors followed. Meanwhile, the war for December 25th went fully planetary. Netflix released Christmas movies by the dozens, and Coca-Cola product placement appeared in nearly all of them. A couple meets cute over 2 bottles at a holiday market. A grieving widow finds new love when Santa leaves a Coke on her mantle instead of milk. The brand never paid for the appearances. Directors simply wrote the bottle into scenes the way they once wrote in cigarettes, because the red ribbon and silver cap had become shorthand for comfort itself. In 2018, a streaming film titled The Christmas Chronicles cast Kurt Russell as a hip rock and roll Santa who saves the day by hot-wiring a Dodge Charger and handing out miniature Coca-Colas to carolers. Children who watched it on Christmas Eve believed they had seen documentary footage. The company issued a single tweet, a winking emoji, and the word approved. Back in the physical world, the conquest grew architectural. In 2015, Coca-Cola purchased the entire exterior of the Ion Orchard Mall in Singapore and wrapped it in living LED lights that played animated Santas drinking Coke in perfect synchronization across 5 stories. Shoppers below looked up and saw a building-sized sunbloom painting come to life. In Atlanta, the company opened the World of Coca-Cola Museum and dedicated an entire wing to Christmas, complete with the original sunbloom oils under museum glass and a holographic Santa who greeted visitors by name if they scanned their ticket. Every child left with a commemorative glass bottle and the unmistakable sense that they had just met the real thing. The line between pilgrimage and brand activation dissolved like sugar in water. Then came the backlash. Quiet at first, then loud. In 2016, a viral video showed the Sami people of northern Scandinavia protesting that Coca-Cola trucks were disturbing reindeer herds during calving season. Activists pointed out that the Arctic the company romanticized was melting because of the carbon emissions required to produce billions of aluminum cans. Documentaries appeared with titles like Santa's Little Sweatshop, accusing the company of using sugar grown on deforested land in Brazil. Health advocates marched with posters of obese children dressed as Santa. For the first time since 1931, the myth showed cracks. Coca-Cola responded the way empires always respond when their gods are questioned. It evolved the story faster than the critics could document it. Santa went zero sugar. The polar bears learned sign language to promote inclusion. The red trucks switched to hydroelectric power in Norway and biodiesel in Colombia. Every accusation was absorbed, sanded down, and re-released as a new chapter of the legend. The company even funded a study proving that the emotional high of the Christmas truck tour reduced seasonal depression in the United Kingdom by measurable percentages. The critics were left arguing with a feeling. In 2020, the pandemic arrived and locked the world indoors. Christmas threatened to become a Zoom call with unopened boxes. Coca-Cola spent 9 figures on a single campaign titled, "Open Like Never Before." The commercial opened on an empty city street at night. A little girl taped a hand-drawn picture of Santa to her window. Cut to hundreds of windows across the planet, lighting up with the same drawing. Cut to delivery drivers dropping bottles on doorsteps without ringing the bell. Cut to Santa himself, masked, standing 6 feet away on rooftops, holding a lantern made of glowing red glass. The voiceover, delivered by a child, said, This year, we can't open our homes, so we opened our hearts. It aired in 90 countries simultaneously and broke streaming records. Hospitals played it in pediatric wards. Soldiers watched it on bases in the Middle East and cried because the snow looked exactly like home. The company reported its highest Christmas quarter revenue ever, while half the planet was forbidden to gather in groups larger than 10. The message was unmistakable. Plague could stop communion. War could stop trade. Fire and flood could devour cities. But nothing could stop Christmas as long as Coca-Cola still had trucks, cameras, and a color that bled into human hope like ink in water. The saint who once defied emperors by resurrecting murdered children had become the one thing no empire on earth could kill. A corporation too warm to regulate, too universal to boycott, too beloved to be held accountable. The bones in Bari kept their silence. The manna still seeped from the crypt. But the real miracle now happened every November, when the first red truck rounded the first corner, and the entire species, for one brief month, agreed to believe the same beautiful lie. The year is late now. The 21st century has burned through its first quarter and left scorch marks on the snow. The Arctic ice that once reflected Sunbloom's red coat like a mirror is cracking into turquoise shards and sliding into a warming sea. Children in 2025 open holographic advent calendars projected from their phones and find a new Coca-Cola flavor every morning. Gingerbread Zero, Cinnamon Frost, Toasted Marshmallow. They have never left a shoe by the fire. They have never heard the name Myra. They know only that when the red trucks appear on their feeds, something ancient inside them stirs and tells them the world is about to become kind again. They are not wrong. They are merely the final generation in a 2,000-year relay that began with a bag of gold thrown through a window in the dark and ends with a drone dropping a chilled bottle on a rooftop in Lagos or Mumbai or Reykjavik, while an algorithm wishes them Merry Christmas in their native tongue. Saint Nicholas, wherever he watches from, must see the entire arc at once. He sees the terrified father discovering gold in his daughter's stocking and falling to his knees in gratitude. He sees Italian sailors cracking open his sarcophagus under torchlight. He sees Dutch children leaving hay in wooden clogs for a white horse that never tires. He sees Clement Clark Moore scribbling reindeer names by candlelight. He sees Haddon Sunbloom mixing vermilion and flesh tone on a Chicago palette in 1931 while the Depression howls outside the window. He sees Robert Woodruff staring at sales charts and understanding with the clarity of a prophet that love and commerce are not opposites, they are raw materials waiting for the right refinery. And he sees the present moment, 7 billion people synchronized for 30 days every year by a color, a curve, a carbonate hiss, and a promise that the sun will return, that gifts will come, that no one need be forgotten if they simply open the bottle and drink. The theft is complete. The crime was perfect. No blood was spilled. No edict was issued. No army marched. A bishop who gave everything away became the justification for taking everything back, multiplied by billions, wrapped in ribbon, and placed beneath electric trees that consume more power in one season than his entire city ever knew. Yet the strangest truth remains. The feeling survives. The original miracle, the one Nicholas performed when he refused to let 3 girls disappear into darkness, still happens every December. A child somewhere wakes to find the impossible gift. A parent who cannot afford heat watches their kid laugh at glowing reindeer on a screen and feels, for one evening, that the universe has not forgotten them after all. The mechanism has changed. The gold is now plastic and debt. The window is now a delivery slot. The silence is now jingles. But the shiver at the core is the same shiver that moved a rich young man in Patara to walk through the night with heavy purses 2 millennia ago. Coca-Cola never invented generosity. It simply industrialized it, standardized it, and distributed it at scale until the emotion itself carried the trademark. The red ribbon around the planet is not a bow. It is a leash disguised as a hug. And humanity, exhausted by its own history, crawled willingly into the loop and asked for more. In the basilica at Bari, the tourists still come. They photograph the crypt, buy the postcards, light the candles. Few of them notice the small side chapel where a single icon from the 11th century still hangs. Nicholas, thin and severe, eyes burning with something that looks almost like anger. He holds no bottle. His hand is raised in blessing, but the fingers are tense, as if he has just let go of something heavy and is watching it arc through the air toward a window he will never see again. Above the cathedral, night after night, satellites beam the latest Christmas spot to every screen on Earth. Santa pauses on a rooftop, condensation beating on glass, and smiles the same smile Sonnenblum gave him almost 100 years ago. The image is weightless now. It travels faster than light. It costs nothing to copy. It belongs to no nation, no church, no child alone. It is the final form of the miracle, a gift that never runs out, a presence that never leaves, a saint who finally learned how to be everywhere at once. And somewhere in the static between the signal and the soul, the real Nicholas keeps walking through the snow that no longer falls in Georgia, carrying bags no one will ever thank him for, looking for windows that still open in the dark. The world drinks, the sun returns, the wheel turns, the theft is forgiven, because the gift, against every rule of economics and every protest of history, keeps arriving. Merry Christmas. The pause that refreshes has become the pause that endures. And the saint who started it all has finally, after 2,000 years, managed to give himself away completely.